All right. I just put us live.
Oh, cool.
'Cause that's how we roll. We're just not afraid anymore.
I know you're going to ask me.
Well, hang on.
Okay.
I would say it's not Friday if we're not doing a LinkedIn Live. It gets to the point now where I'm like, man, if we're not doing a LinkedIn Live on a Friday, either with you or with other of our like third party guests or guys and gals that are in the industry, it just doesn't feel like a Friday. So, with that said, welcome everybody to LinkedIn Live Founders in the Funnel. This is a Grow IT Partners edition, which means I've got my partner, co-founder Luke, with us. And welcome. And you know what the next question is?
I do. What are we talking about today?
Yeah.
Since you put us live immediately,
I did.
This is unscripted as always.
I was trying to do it a little bit earlier, and I was going to sit there and just kind of talk, wait for you to come on. But you came on right when I did it. So, hey, your mic, by the way, sounds a little. I don't know if you got it set up correctly. Is it doing on your earphones or is it on that one? It sounds like it's almost on your.
It's on this one.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'll go
double check the settings on just because I think that.
Oh, it's the mic is through my webcam. I guess you're right.
I can tell.
All right, is that right?
Oh, now you sound like a DJ. Sweet.
All right, good. I didn't even know that my webcam had a mic, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's not very good.
Well, clearly.
All right, so what do I always? Should I just kick it off the same way? What are we going to talk about today, Luke?
Well, that's a good question. I think today we should just talk about, the growth constraints that a lot of consulting founders face when they're trying to grow their firm, and then what it looks like to actually build, a growth engine for your consulting, professional services, IT firm, whatever it may be. I think that's a good place for us to start.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I would I'm going to give kind of even someone that's like, okay, well, I'm not really in consulting, or I'm kind of in consulting, or I'm kind of in a professional services. And where we find this really effective is for firms that have grown by referrals, network leads, word of mouth, right? And more importantly, that have like a high client lifetime value. And what does that mean? Like, okay, and I always tell people like, hey, just back of napkin math is like, hey, how much revenue did you do this year? Did you do this year? And how many clients contributed to that, right? It's like simple math. Like, okay, we did, 5 million and we had, 10 clients that contributed to it. So our average CLTV for the year is like 500,000, right? And the CLTV, that's kind of like, that's more of like annual, because client lifetime value is like, okay, well, I've done revenue with those clients over the course of the year. And that's really the better, more accurate version. I just like to back a napkin math that way in terms of getting at least a 1 year assessment on it.
Yeah, because I think that for most of the people probably listening to this, they do keep clients for multiple years. But at the end of the day, like a lot of the people that we speak to, LTV is kind of a new, it's a new metric for them. It's not something that they've tracked over time.
Right.
So I think that your back of napkin math is a good at least starting point to lowball it.
Yeah, and I think a good like rule of thumb is like, hey, if your client lifetime value is, let's call it, I don't know, 40 or 50,000 or more, this is applicable to you. If you're like, hey, we do transactional stuff and it's more of like in the $5,000 to $20,000, and that's where our client lifetime value is less than that, it's probably not going to apply to you. So.
Yeah, and
you can tune out unless you like listening to Luke and I and just cut jokes. But other than that, in terms of a business applicable,
man, I'm having to catch my breath here. I was just out shoveling for like 30 minutes. We got like a foot of snow here this morning.
Really?
Yeah.
We're pretty good. Our snow is already like melted off, and I'm like, and we've been getting in the mountains, which you and I both like to. I think I'm going to try and either go Sunday, take the boys and go up Sunday, or maybe even Sunday, Monday. We'll see. But
nice.
Yeah, that shoveling snow is good.
It's a good workout. Yeah, you're lucky you got your boys to take some of the load.
I know. Yeah, and I still do a little bit of it, but I'm like, hey, go out there and get your workout in before we go to the gym. So.
All right, so where should we start? I think I think I can kind of cue you up for something because as I was out there shoveling snow this morning, I was listening to our to Uncle Alex talk, Alex Hormozy, and he was talking about how at acquisition.com they do everything through the theory of constraints, where it all comes down to, what is that biggest constraint in the business, and how do we solve it? And the first thing that they always do when it comes to solving the constraint is like, do we have something that's work? So like, let's say the constraint in a business is your sales and marketing. Like, what has worked up to this point, and can we just do more of what has worked to solve that constraint before we try and bring in anything new or different? And I think that is a really good place to start here, because so many consulting founders grow their firms over their lifetime through relationships, through their networks, through referrals. And then they hit this growth plateau where they have a constraint in their business. And instead of thinking, how can we do more of what has already worked, they reach into the box of traditional sales and marketing Legos, and they always find themselves stuck. So with that, I'll kind of cue it up for you to give us an intro there.
Well, and I think that a lot of that stems from the fact of how they've grown their firms, right? Because they've grown from referrals or network leads, and typically they'll come in. Everyone that comes in may be a different industry, have a different, need, or a different specific need, right? So you're kind of become this jack of all trades. Yeah. For a minute, I was going to jack of all knives. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I think I was going to mix up Swiss Army knife and jack of all trades. You become kind of a jack of all trades, right? And so you don't stop to think, hey, which of these delivery mechanisms, right, or these delivery processes are getting the best results from my clients and are the most profitable for my firm, right? Mm-hmm. You just don't have that luxury. You just, you kind of take what comes in the door or comes in, and you adjust and you do it. And so I think having to just look at that and take a step back, and that's usually one of the first things, like, okay, like, who's your ideal client profile, right? Like, and it's like, oh, we've done work across, we can help anybody. That's usually the first one. It's like, okay, got it, right? Like, but like, who have you done, maybe the most work for, right? In a specific industry or a specific
who pays you the most? Who's the least headache to work with? Who stays with you the longest? Who do you enjoy talking to? Like, those are the questions we typically like to ask folks, because, any founder, if you ask them those questions, there's going to be clients that immediately come to mind as like, oh, I like talking to those people. I really like working with those people. I really like solving these problems. And then there's going to be the clients that come to mind that are like, oh my God, like these clients keep me up at night. They're the first thing I think about in the morning. Like, it's just the stress of those clients. And it's like, if you want to grow, if you have the choice to grow your business, do you want to grow your business and take on more of those clients, or more of the clients that you look forward to working with and you look forward to having? So like, if you're actively going to be building a growth engine, why would you actively build a growth engine and keep taking on clients that you don't like working with? You're just going to multiply the stress that you have in your business. So really, step one is like, okay, who do I like working with? And if I'm going to build a growth engine, how can I bring more of those people into my ecosystem?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when they go to do that, this is kind of like a reset. It's not necessarily a reset. It's kind of a fork in the road in their business, right? Because of the nature of how they've grown their business, and to go, oh, wow. Right. Like, it's not just like, hey, great, how can I go out and get more leads? There's lead generation doesn't even exist for this type of business, right? Because it's so relationship driven, right? It's, like, look at what you've done in your own business in terms of growing it to this point. And it's like, none of those came as leads. Even if it's a channel partner lead, right? That relationship has been developed over the course of years, right? So like, but it's probably the nature of their business that they've kind of like, taken on these different types of, roles and different projects and different industries across, that they kind of need to stop and be like, okay, here's a fork in my road. I can continue to do this, right? Which is just basically taking what comes in the door, or maybe, while I'm doing that, take kind of a strategic approach here and say, okay, like, let's take a look at who is the ideal prospects, and then target them, right, in kind of this growth engine, right? I don't know if I've articulated that correctly, but like,
yeah, I think you've articulated it well. I mean, it really comes down to, I love the concept of more better. And I think it's one that we have consistently broken in this industry over and over and over again, and with our own business, because
Explain that.
yeah. So, I mean, obviously, Terrence, you come from a traditional marketing background. You know, I have a traditional marketing background as well. And so when we first came into, you know, working with consulting firms, relationship driven firms, IT firms, we tried to do what everybody in this industry does and
Yeah.
tries to
Yeah.
take these firms that have grown through relationships, network, word of mouth, and we try and take them and just throw the traditional sales and marketing tools at it, you know, ads, email, like all this stuff. We've tried all of it because that's what our background was in. But then throughout the course of working in this industry over the last couple of years, what we've realized is when consulting firm founders, IT firm founders, you know, anybody in this relationship-based business, when they hit the growth plateau where they feel like their relationships are tapped out, like they can't grow it sustainably anymore from referrals from relationships, instead of diverting towards that traditional marketing path, because it does not work. Like it just does not work. Like you mentioned, I think the word lead generation and leads should just be completely banned
Completely struck.
from
Yeah,
relationship.
I don't care if it's
industries.
MQLs, SQLs, marketing qualified lead, like yes, like all of it is specific to our ICP and the folks we're talking about, and it should be just strictly removed from the.
And I think you made such a good point that I hadn't thought about, because I've always talked about how we should ban the word lead from you know, from all of our clients and this entire industry, other than like referral leads. But the really good point that I think you made is a referral lead still comes from a relationship. Like that relationship was still built a long time ago. That relationship with that referral partner has been built over time. And so even if you want to call that a lead, at the end of the day, that is really just a extended relationship. And so where I was going with this is like, everybody wants to, when they hit that growth plateau, think about leads. They want to think about lead generation. They want more leads for their business because they've been told, you know, if you have more leads, obviously you're going to have more business. You're going to grow your business. But at the end of the day, that just, you know, from working with consulting, IT, professional service firms every day for the last couple of years, it just, frankly, having leads is not something that works in this industry. It's how many relationships do you have with your ideal clients, with your, you know, dream referral partners. And
Yes.
and you might think that like whatever, you can call it whatever you want, lead versus relationship. But I think there's a huge difference between calling it a lead versus a relationship. And I think it comes down to like transactional versus relationship based. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
I just want to go back to the channel partner, because again, I think sometimes we found that we even talk with our own clients, right? Is like they're like, well, I get leads from let's name big channel partner like in IT, Microsoft, right? Like I get leads from Microsoft. Okay, got it. But that's not the relationship that allowed you to get those leads. Let's talk about that relationship, how that was started, how you, and then all of a sudden it goes back years. They had worked with them in a previous company. It started with one relationship with inside Microsoft, then it, you know, spidered to a multiple. And it's like, okay, right. So like, I think too, anyone that's like, well, leads work. I just need more of those. I need more of those leads coming. It's like, cool, got it. This still works. This still means, hey, can you go build relationships with other channel and referral and lead partners? But understanding that's still the same process. So I do like to articulate that part, which is there's no cheat code. It still works the same way, whether you go out to your ICP to establish those relationships or go direct out to channel referral partners to establish those relationships that will then pay off dividends. Kind of like, you know, hey, like we talk about, hey, go out and plant the tree, right? And you wouldn't go out, you know, a month later and expect it to bear fruit, right? It's same thing with, you know, going into channel partners and developing those relationships. It's like, yeah, it will bear fruit. It's going to be down the road. But anyway, I just want to kind of, just for the people that are like, well, wait a second, leads work. I get warm leads from my referral partners. Like, yes, you do, right? And so then the same process will work as well. But I just want to differentiate. But other than that, lead generation be thrown out of the conversation.
Again, I think it's really, really important. You know, we want to throw away the term lead, and we want to throw away the term lead generation for this entire industry. And we want to replace it with relationships and relationship gen. And if you're thinking, oh, there's not a big difference, there's a huge difference in the way you view each of those. There's a huge difference in the way that you view a lead versus you view a relationship.
Let's talk to that. That's 100%. It is very, very valid.
I mean, I'm just thinking about like past clients we have. Let's think through the way that the ones who call them leads think through. It's very transactional. It's very, do they have a budget tomorrow? Do they have the exact pain point I can solve? And are they going to pay me money in the next, month, 2 months? That's how we've found people treat leads. It's very transactional. It's what can they do for me today? What can they do for me tomorrow? Versus the clients that have been most successful for us, in the consulting industry are the ones who treat everybody as a relationship. If you have the CIO of an enterprise, let's just say Fortune 500 company that comes into your ecosystem, you can choose to treat that CIO as a lead, or you can choose to treat that CIO as a relationship. If you treat that CIO as a lead, most likely they're not going to have an immediate need for your services. They're most likely not going to have an immediate, budget to pay you money. And so you're going to throw that lead to the side because it's not a hot lead. It's not what you're looking for at that moment. But if you choose to treat that enterprise Fortune 500 CIO as a relationship, you're not going to care about what's in it for you today or tomorrow or the next day. You're going to genuinely build the trust and build the relationship and treat it as a long-term game. And you're going to actually build that human-to-human connection with them. And even if they don't have a need for you, if you're building relationships with the right people in your ideal client profile, some of them might have an immediate need, and that's great. But others are going to have a need in 6 months. Others are going to have a need in 12 months. Others are going to have a need in 5 years. But you know who they're going to go to for that need is the person that they've built a genuine human-to-human relationship with, not the people that have just treated them as a transactional lead and thrown them out the door when they didn't have an immediate need for their services. And that's why the way you talk about this in this industry is so important. Because all the clients that we've had that have not succeeded talk about leads. And all the clients that we've had that do succeed talk about relationships.
Man, that's like a mic drop, right? That is exactly correct, right? And some of it probably is a result of going out to the marketplace to find what I like to call sales and marketing Legos to fix the challenges and issues that they have, which is, okay, I'm this $5 million firm. I've grown from referrals, word of mouth, network leads. How do I grow my firm beyond that, right? Like, how do I double? Like, how do I get from 5 million to 10 million? Mm-hmm. Start going out to the marketplace and then talking with different sales and market, right? Hey, I'm going to hire a biz dev guy to replace me. That never works, right? Because the same thing. It's a relationship. Right? You built your firm because you've developed these great relationships, right? And so to bring in a biz dev guy and all of a sudden expect him to come in with a Rolodex, probably is coming with a Rolex if he's really good, but he or she, but right, come in with a Rolodex and fix and be like, great, I'm going to tap it. It just doesn't work, right? And so some of this is like even that long-term, short-term, mentality. But let's go back to like the different sales and marketing, Legos, and going out to the marketplace and talking with different, people who are in our space, are in sales and marketing, right? Doesn't matter if it's, CROs, services, agencies providing SDR services, cold outreach, marketing agencies are telling you different, things. So it's a result of going out to the marketplace to seeing what out there, what different types of marketing Legos, sales and marketing Legos are available, and trying to implement it. And then going, this doesn't work. This didn't work. Mm-hmm. This didn't work. We hear that all the time. Right. And I think one of the reasons is because a lot of that lead generation, a lot of things that are sold out in the marketplace, whether it's the salesperson with a Rolex and claiming he or she has a Rolodex, or marketing agencies claiming different things, they're selling short-term fixes, right? they're selling to what your desires with the short-term fix. And we have never encountered anyone who has found success with any of those short-term fixes. What I mean by that is something that they've gone and implemented and it's worked within 6 months. Nobody. Right?
No.
And so I think that's the big component of it, is going out to the marketplace. The marketplace is going to sell you that pain that you have, which is, hey, this will fix the pain you have in a short-term approach.
Yeah.
And it won't, because this is a very specific need in this industry, in IT consulting or any consulting or professional services, who is, has relationship driven. There are no cheat codes. There are no short-term fixes. There are no marketing agencies or sales agencies out there, or any salesperson with a Rolex on a Rolodex that's going to come in and fix your challenge today in terms of growing your firm.
Well, let's unpack this, because I think this is a key point right here. And I think one of the root causes of everything that you just talked about is the fact that so many of these consulting founders, they build their firm through these relationships, through these networks, through these, referral partners, and they're kind of fat and happy with that. That's the perfect world. If you could grow your business just off your relationships and leads are coming into you don't have to work that hard to build out a really good sales process because they come in warm. That's an awesome scenario to be in. And so most of these founders that we talk to, they grow their business to this 2 to 5, 6,
even
7
10 million.
Really 2 to 10 million range on these channels. But the problem is they aren't proactively building out a sustainable growth engine early enough. And so eventually one day those lead sources start to dry up. Microsoft reprioritizes where they're sending leads. Your channel partner, the relationship you have with a channel partner leaves. So your lead source dries up there. And there's this catalyst moment where I think most consulting founders hit that oh shit moment, where it's I can't rely on growing my business to this point anymore. And then it puts them in an absolute scarcity mindset because they haven't proactively built out that system when they were fat and happy. And then they hit the point where the lead sources dry up, and then they're trying to go out to the market and find these silver bullets because they now have this immediate pain. And that's just such a huge problem that we see in the market, because I would argue that we're the best at what we do in this industry, because there's really nothing else that works. We're not we make it very clear to every partner that we take on that our goal is not to get them deals in the first 6 months. We do not claim to be a silver bullet. We're not trying to be your quick hack, your short-term solution. We know that what our system does is build you a reliable growth engine over the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, but it's not going to get you deals in the next 3 months, in the next 4 months. And that's one of the core problems, is when firms wait too long, they're forced to go try all those marketing and sales silver bullets. And then they find out that those don't work for the relationship-based nature of the consulting industry.
They don't work at all. And I think there's a few things there. And we've had clients in the past too, where they are stretched so thin because of, and again, I think some of it is just the being honest and upfront with folks and saying, hey, is this truly what you want to do? Do you truly want to grow your firm? Right? They get it to a point where it's okay, it's almost I don't want to call it a lifestyle business, but it's hey, it's manageable. I get it, right? Maybe there's going to be some inconsistencies, but if you truly want to grow your firm and take it, because we hear this a lot too, from 5 million to 10 million, right? Because they either want to make, an exit and get a higher multiple on the sale of their business or whatever it may be, right? If you truly want to do that, then it needs a correct strategy. Our strategy works. It works. Again, it's a long-term strategy, but it works. But if you go into it and you are not prepared for what it takes in terms of how long to get there and what it will take from your end, then you might just be better off maintaining your business as it is, because it's going to require work. It's going to require some effort. And you don't just get like, look at how long it took you to build up this $5 million firm that you have, right? That's no easy task. Like it's to be commended, right? All the relationships and the things that you've done over the last 10, 20 years, right? And it took time, right? It didn't, no one just stepped into it in year one in your consulting firm, right? I'm sure people come to you and be like, how do I, hey, Bob, how do I, create a $5 million consulting firm, right? Your first answer wouldn't be, well, here's the roadmap. You can get there in 6 months, right? Or 12 months, right? It's just not possible, right? So it's the same way, that you wouldn't expect to get from 5 million to 10 million in 6 months with some marketing Lego.
I love that analogy right there. And I can't believe we haven't really used, you've kind of used this before, but we've never like fully elaborated on it. It's like, I just want to stay on that for a second, because if you're a $5 million consulting firm founder and somebody asks you, how do I build a $5 million consulting firm? Your answer would be, well, I started out working at Microsoft. I was a technical engineer there for a long time. I built a lot of relationships while I was at Microsoft. Then I went over and worked at Snowflake for a while, and I was built a lot more relationships there. And then eventually I felt like I had something unique to offer, so I started my firm. And then my first client came from one of the relationships that I'd made at Microsoft. My second client came from one of the relationships I'd made at Snowflake. And then my third client came from a referral from that first client I had. My fourth client came from a referral from that client. My fifth client came from a referral from the that one. And this is over the course of like a period of 10 years. And so your answer to how you built a $5 million consulting firm spans 10, 20, 30 years. But then so many founders, when they come to us, they're like, I want to take my firm from 5 to 10 million. They forget that that's how they got to 5 million. And they think that all of a sudden that they can get to 10 million overnight. And just genuinely, I really don't think that is possible in the consulting industry, because it is so relationship based. It is like relationships, everything in the consulting sphere is long-term. Relationships take a long time to build. Like you can't just all of a sudden build a relationship in 2 days. You can't build a relationship in a month that's actually a meaningful relationship. Like every meaningful relationship you have in your life is probably one that has spanned 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 years. So there's no shortcuts to that. Just like just sales cycles are long in the consulting industry too. Everything in the consulting industry is long term. And so when people start trying to think in short term and take shortcuts, it's just the quickest way to fail. I mean.
So Claire, Ali just joined as our co-founder who handles our sales front. And Ali, we're just talking about obviously the relationship driven nature of the business, and Sal, understanding that and I want to get, I'm glad you jumped in here. Your take is obviously you're talking to a lot of these firms and professional services, and we, hey, there is no easy fix, right? Like there is no quick fix. There's no lead generation that's going to fix it. The same way that you built your $5 million firm was over, 10 and 20 years of, working at different potential channel partners, establishing relationships, building out your network that you then leverage to build your firm over time to 5 million. There is no easy quick fix that's going to get you from 5 to 10 million, right? Or even from 5 to 7 million, right? And so, I'm curious, because you obviously are the tip of our spear and talking to a lot of, prospects. What are the pains that you're seeing from that $2 to $10 million, range, right, that are consulting firms, whether it's IT firms, strategic, consulting, professional services that have a high client lifetime value, meaning that, what I like to say, what every client is worth to them, right? A monetary value of, let's call it $50,000 or more over the lifetime of that relationship. Like, what are you hearing from them in terms of their pains, their frustrations, their misses, whether it's going out to the marketplace and hiring marketing agencies or sales guys or gals that haven't worked out. Like maybe share with us some of the conversations that you're having with prospects and folks.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I have a lot of them, right? So we talked to a lot of different, founders and CEOs of these consulting firms, be it in IT, tech, HR, leadership, right? You name it. We've probably talked to them. And I think a common recurring theme that I'm always hearing from these different folks is the fact that they've, especially within that, 1 to 10 million mark, they predominantly have grown through referrals, right? And their network. They have big networks that either sometimes have worked at a previous company, right? And they have all these connections that they made, and then they go to start off a consulting firm, and they leverage their network and their connections to, build their business. And they all, at some point, you hit this plateau, right? You grow as, as a company, and you get all these referrals, and at some point, you can't break through like this ceiling that you have, because you don't have a predictable system to bring in new clients, right? Because the thing about referrals is that some months you're getting a lot, right? And then the next months you're not getting a lot, right? And so you don't have this predictability to bringing on new clients. And so they're stuck in this trap of, some months are really good and some months are really bad, right? And so it's just this kind of roller coaster that kind of ends the year, and they're used to this, inconsistency. And so one of the biggest things that I think I hear from those founders is exactly that. They don't have any consistency to their pipeline, or they're not confident in the pipeline that they're building, in the leads that are coming in, because they're only relying upon one channel. And if you only have one channel to grow your business, you're leaving yourself at a lot of risk when it comes to growing your business. And it's going to be very hard for you to get to those next levels. And so I guess one of the pieces of advice that we will always give is that, think about, first of all, what that channel has brought you in terms of, how you got those clients to begin with, right? It all starts with a relationship, right? It all started with a first conversation with those folks. And typically referrals are going to be your best clients and easiest to close, because of the fact that they're getting referred to someone that you did really good work with. So they already have a high perceived, good image of you in their mind. And so that they feel like that you be able to deliver upon the outcome that you do. However, when you want to build a system that's to cold traffic, right, and to people who don't know you, they've never heard of you, you have to build what we call the relationship funnel, right? It's the only way to get your deals through the line. And it all starts with getting people into conversations and not trying to circumvent the process, right? Because I think we see that a lot of times is that in these more relationship-driven firms, I always tell people, you're not selling peanuts, right? It'd be one thing if you're selling peanuts, if you're selling, a small ticket item, yeah, you could just ram a whole bunch of people through your funnel and just sell them what you got. But if you're selling a very complicated solution, you have to be able to have that relationship first, right? And so what we always work with clients on, what we're always telling them is like, think about how to build out a relationship funnel rather than thinking about how do I get more leads inside the door.
And it's the perfect tie-in to what, how Terrence and I started this conversation, which was talking about what Hormozi always says, which is like, when you're trying to solve a constraint, the first thing you should always ask yourself is, how can I do more better before I bring in new and different? And I think that goes back to what you're saying there, Ali, is like, instead of reaching into the traditional sales and marketing Legos that are completely new to you, that you've never done in your consulting firm, that you don't even know if work in your consulting firm, the first thing you need to do is think, okay, I've grown up to this point using my relationships and my network. If I were to double the number of relationships that I have with, let's say your ideal client is CIOs. If I were to double the number of relationships I have with CIOs over this next year, do I think that would have a positive impact on my business? If I have maybe 3 key referral partners that are like account executives at Microsoft, and most of my lead flow comes from them, how can I make that 6? Like, if I have 6 of those relationships, do I not think that is going to have a huge effect on my business? And so I would say, like, one of the first things to think through is like, how can I do more better versus any new? Because we have yet to see anybody, Ollie, you talk to more people, that has made new work in the consulting industry. Like, I've not talked to a single person where cold emails worked, or ads have worked, or SEO has really done much. Like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and the outreach in general, right? When you think about going to like the really good types of offers that are good with cold traffic, they typically solve a specific problem. And when it comes to consulting, is you don't just solve one problem, right? So you can't create an email that says, "Hey, I offer consulting solutions," right, to solve all your problems within your business, right? That's not going to be able to resonate with the cold market. And so that's the reason why typically consultants have a hard time with the outreach that they do, because they can offer such a wide variety of services and different custom solutions that they can't possibly pack that into an email, right? So it's impossible to kind of get your messaging right when you have all these different solutions that you can offer. And that's typically why you don't see a lot of these consulting having good success with, like I said, I haven't talked to one consulting firm owner that has had success with, be it cold email or be it, cold outreach on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go. Sorry, Luke, I don't want to kill you up, but I want to go into the how part. And Ollie, it was a great transition. Ollie didn't even know you jumped in halfway, right? Like, I want to go into the how to build, right? Like, let's talk through the different things. Oh my God, I think I choked on my water there. I want to talk through the different parts of how to then, right? And Ollie, whether it's you or Luke that wants to kind of answer this, let's talk through the mechanics of how, right? So someone's sitting there going, okay, yeah, I get it, right? That's how I built my firm. I want to break away from, referrals, and I want to build a predictable pipeline of deal flow, and more importantly, a growth engine will allow me to do that. So what are the blocking and tackling? What are some of the different things that they can do and implement?
You want me to tackle that, Luke?
Yeah, we'll take it together.
We'll go step by step. Okay, we'll start with the fundamentals, right? Because we're a big company on, if you do the fundamentals right, it's a building blocks in terms of what it is that you're going to be able to do on top of that. So fundamentals, number one, is ideal client profile, right? Who is it that you guys are targeting? And we talked to a lot of consultants, and they're like, "Hey, well, we can work with everybody. We can work with a whole bunch of people." And I'm like, "Okay, that's great that you have your solutions can go across different industries, across different use cases. However, for the sake of marketing and for the sake of your sales strategy, you need to make sure that you hone it." So the first thing you got to ask yourself is, what clients pay me the most? What clients do I provide the most value to? And what clients are typically the easiest to close, right? And if you can get a trifecta of those three, that is your ideal client profile. And then once you've established your ideal client profile and you've understood who it is, right? The second thing you have to ask yourself is, how can I position myself differently than the rest of the market, right? What can I lean into in terms of my expertise that I am going to be different when everybody's looking at me compared to the rest of the market? And so those are the two first steps that you should take. And ideally, what you also want with your ideal client profile is you want a lot of testimonials and case studies within that certain industry as well. And so that's laying the foundation. Luke, I'll maybe let you take the second step from that itself, but I feel like that's the fundamentals that everyone kind of forgets sometimes, and they want to get into the tactics before we start to nail the fundamentals.
And by the way, before you go pick that up, Luke, a lot of that, what you just described, Ollie, is a symptom of what's kind of how they've grown their business in the first place, right? Which is referrals and everything. So really that the fact that they're taking whatever comes in the door, like, hey, can you move us from on-prem, data to the cloud? Okay, great. What industry? It doesn't, right? That's been a symptom of the fact they've grown their firm with referrals and network leads. So they're become, like I said, this jack of all trades, or this Swiss Army knife. I separated my analogies correctly this time, right? So that's really the symptom, right? And so what you're saying is exactly right, which is like, hey, you got to start there, which is like, pull yourself back and start with, who's that ideal client profile? What do they look like, right? So that I can effectively build a strategy from there. Luke?
Yep. And I think that's the perfect lead in, because, once you have, so like Ollie mentioned, step one, like you've nailed down your ideal client profile. You are going to be the person for, IT for healthcare enterprise payers, like very specific. You are going to be the guy for that. It all comes down to, how can you actually build trust and build your authority for that ideal client profile? And this is one of the reasons it's so important to get step one right, like Ollie was just talking about, is because if you try and go out and put out content and thought leadership and establish yourself as an authority and build trust with the whole market as a whole, you're going to end up resonating with absolutely nobody. And so our step two is really all about building a trust and authority engine at scale. Because if you think about what really works in the consulting and in relationship-driven industries, it's all about trust, and it's all about having that authority, because people want to do business, especially in these high ticket, situations, with people they trust, with people they know are the authority. And most importantly, they want to do business with specialists. Like, think about the generalist surgeon versus the specialist surgeon. I think it's such a good analogy, because if I have a specific problem, am I going to go to a generalist surgeon, or am I going to go to a surgeon that only does the one surgery that I need, and he does it all day, every day, and he's positioned as the absolute authority for that specific that surgery? It's the same exact thing in your consulting and, professional services IT business. You need to be the number one go-to person for a specific niche. And how you do that is you put out content reliably, and you put out content that is valuable to your ideal client profile. You're putting out thought leadership content. You're answering their questions. You're giving them valuable lead magnets.
On that, like, valuable content, right? Because I think people think about content. They think about, posting something for Thanksgiving or posting something for December, that when, that they're happy or whatever it is, right? Let's talk about like content that actually, works and that's actually valuable.
Yeah. And I think it's such a good point, because 95% of, the businesses that we talk to and founders that we talk to aren't actually putting out content. The other 5, the type of content that they're putting out is like generic marketing pamphlets through their company, or they're putting out like a long form post about one of their services or something like that. And that is just not how you build trust and relationships at scale. That's not how you provide value to your audience. The value comes from answering the top pains, challenges, thoughts of your ideal client profile and giving it all away. Like, give it all away. Don't think about what's in it for you. You're not trying to route them to your website. You're not trying to inform them on one of your services. You're not posting to them about Thanksgiving or something like that. You're just genuinely answering the root cause of their biggest challenges and pain points. Because, like, think about it. If you're scrolling through your LinkedIn feed and you see a post that's, targeted to you, like, for us, we're, agency founders. Like, if we see one of those like that, I'm going to stop. And if it's a valuable post that literally answers one of my top pain points that I'm struggling with and provides some new insight to me, I'm like, oh, this person, knows what they're talking about. This is interesting. I'll click on their profile. I'll go follow them. I'll start seeing more and more of their content. If they're constantly putting out valuable content, I'm going to build up trust with them because they're constantly providing new perspectives to me. They're answering my challenges. They're helping me get to where I want to go. And that's what the content engine is all about. It's how can you build a reliable, valuable content system that's putting that thought leadership content in front of your ideal client profile on a regular basis so that you're building this trust at scale. And once you build the trust at scale, that's what sets you up to succeed in step 3, which I'll toss back over to you, Ollie.
Yeah, so that's everything that we talk about here are like building blocks, right? So step number 1, right, is about identifying that ideal client profile, knowing what is your unique position, what makes you stand out. Step number 2 is starting to establish yourself more as an authority, becoming the go-to market expert so that people look at you as that specialist rather than the generalist, and that people trust you more. And then the third step, and obviously the secret sauce that we'll give to you guys in terms of what it is that we found that works within the consulting space, is getting into conversations with your ideal prospects in a non-disarming way. And what I mean by that is
disarming way.
In a non-disarming way, yeah.
In a disarming way.
Disarming way. In a non-salesy, disarming way.
Yeah. What did I say?
Non-disarming.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
That's all right. You missed my earlier one of trying to mix up the jack of all trades and Swiss Army knife. So
yeah.
Okay. Anyways, so yes, in a disarming way, right? So non-salesy approach. And so what we talk about is how can you identify, 100 dream clients, right? And we have this strategic approach. And now this only works if you are a consulting firm founder or a professional service firm founder that you have high LTV deals, right?
Yeah, we covered
so
that
you want to
earlier.
identify 100 potential ideal prospects that you would love to work with. Now, instead of the traditional of, outreach message that you would send them, I would say, hey, Terrence, would you hop on a discovery call so I can sell you my solutions, right? That you get, 50 of those a day and you get, another 15 within your inbox. I'm going to say, hey, Terrence, would you be open to hopping on a podcast with me? Or, hey, Terrence, would you be open to doing a LinkedIn Live event? Or, hey, Terrence, would you be open to doing a roundtable with me? But essentially what I'm doing, instead of trying to just go straight for the jugular, right, when it comes to getting people on a discovery call, I'm going to provide value for them, first of all, by inviting them to an event that I'm putting on, and I'm going to start to build a relationship with them. And the reason, and just to go back to our methodology a little bit earlier, the reason why we do step number 1 and step number 2 before we do step 3 is because your successes of the outreach that you do to these folks is going to depend on step 1 and 2. For example, what's the first thing that you do when someone reaches out to you? You look at their profile, unless you maybe delete it first if you don't like it. But the second thing that you do, if you're going to even think about responding, is you look at their profile. If they send a message to you on LinkedIn, you're going to look up their LinkedIn. You're going to look up who this person is that's reaching out to you. And if they don't see that you have content, or they don't see that you're an authority within your space, the chances of them responding to you is a lot lower. So that's why we do step 1, 2, and 3. And then we do the outreach as a component of that, because it's going to increase your chances of getting a better success rate. And so it's about building out those relationships through value forward events, whatever it may be, that you can start to build your pipeline with. And that is ultimately what's going to start leading to deal flow. We can get into a little bit more. I don't know if we want to keep going down that step number 3, but that's like a high level overview of exactly what you should do to get into those conversations.
I just want to add one thing to that, because, there'll be some people that listen and they're like, well, if I'm going to my ideal prospect list and I'm inviting them to be on a podcast and then I'm pitching them on my services, isn't that like bait and switchy? It's like, no, because we're not doing that. You're not treating that person as a lead. Like Terrence and I were talking about earlier, there's a huge difference between, calling somebody a relationship and calling somebody a lead. And if you treat somebody as a lead, then yes, it is bait and switchy. But when we use the podcast method, when we use roundtables, we're not trying to get them to close. We're not even trying to pitch them on our services. We're not trying to tell them about our services. We're genuinely just building a relationship with them, and knowing that if they do have a need, that in building the relationship with them, they're going to want to work with the person that they have a relationship with, rather than somebody cold in the market. And so the ones with actual intent will bubble up over time, and you will close deals from them. But you're not treating them as a lead. You are having a human-to-human conversation with them. You're doing a podcast with them. You're building the relationship. You're getting it to the point where you have an actual connection with that person. You're not treating them as a lead. And if you do treat them as a lead, then this method will absolutely fail for you, because if you treat them like a lead, that is bait and switchy.
We use the exact same process in our model, right? In our own funnel, in our own prospecting model, right? Is going out to the market with a value forward approach, right? Like, we don't pitch anybody, like, and the cost of our services is sometimes pales in comparison to the $500,000 deals these consulting firms, professional services are. But we use the exact same process. Like, we don't pitch, like, we go out to the market, we go out with a value forward offer. We have an introduction conversation, just like, hey, great to meet you type of thing, right? It goes on from there, but we don't even make a pitch or an offer to someone, right? 3, 4, 5 meetings in, right? Because it's like, that's not our point. Our purpose, even in our own process, the exact same thing that we're talking about that we do for our clients, is the same process that we use internally, which is, we think value forward, relationship first, right? Like, and if you're going to classify us in the marketing consulting or marketing agency, that's unheard of, right? Like, we always hear from people like, hey, like, do you guys have a 2-call close or a 3-call close? Or like, we don't know what you're talking about. Like, we don't even speak that language, right? And so we, so to speak, eat our own dog food in that methodology, and it works, right? Like, I mean, we have a huge network, right? Because we've gone out to the market with this value forward approach, with the sole purpose of establishing relationships in order to have these conversations, even see if we could be of help. It's the exact same thing as our prospects and clients are doing.
And this is why what we've been talking about with lifetime value is so important, and why this method only works if you do have a high lifetime value. Because if you are selling a $500 widget, or even a $2,000 widget or something, or your lifetime value is even like $5,000, it doesn't make sense for you to be getting into all of these podcast conversations and building these long-term relationships, and having 5, 6, 7 touch points with them to build the relationship before you even know if there's sales interest there or if there's any need. Like, if you have a low lifetime value, it just doesn't make sense. There's better methods for you. But if your lifetime value is 100,000, 200,000, or like some of our clients, $1 million or even $1 million plus, then every single relationship you get into has the potential to completely change your business, has the potential to add $1 million to your revenue this year. Like, you don't need many of these relationships to pan out if you have a high lifetime value to build a really, really good business and build a really good growth engine. And that's why lifetime value is so important. And
one thing I'll add for the people who say that it's bait and switchy is that, or for the people that, don't want to do this type of method, is that I've obviously, I'm the one that's leading the charge a lot of on the sales front over here at Grow IT. So I do a lot of conversation, do a lot of podcasts, and I'll tell you this, that people actually ask me what I do, right? They're like, hey, what do you do? We're interested to hear a little bit more about what you do. And that's also what we're seeing across our clients who are running this, is that when you know why this happens is because if you have your LinkedIn profile optimized and you're posting content and they're checking you out before they actually engage with you, they want to hear what it is that you have to do, right? So you don't even have to really sell sometimes on those. You can just build a relationship, have a conversation about what you do. And a lot of times people will be like, yeah, like we actually have something for you. Could you help us out? And at that point, like everyone that is coming on there, and if they have a need and you can help them and you've built a relationship now, it's going to be way easier to sell that person or to be able to work with that person because they trust you. And that's really the basis of what we're doing, of all consulting and all, relationships and all selling. It all comes down to, trust as well. And so with this process, you're building trust before you actually start selling, which is a great way to actually get, prospects to disarm themselves, right? Because a lot of times prospects will come on sales calls or, discovery meetings with, salespeople, and they'll have this guard up that they don't want to, they don't want to let down because they don't trust that you have the right intentions with them. And so it's all about building that trust, facilitating that. And I guess I'll give a little, a secret sauce over here at the tail end here to even make this method more valuable, is that after the podcast, what you should do and what you should have is you should have an entry offer, right? So everyone tries to get everyone to, like do the $500,000 deal right off the bat, right? Hey, I want to work with you and I want you to pay me $500,000. But instead of that, if you had an entry offer that was a lot less low risk, that you could maybe even reverse the risk for them, have it charge it, fairly small price for it, get them into your ecosystem, provide a lot of value so that then you can upsell them to that $500,000 deal. That's another tip there that we see work really well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because like if we just think about how a conversation naturally goes, like I'm thinking back to like my my girlfriend's office Christmas party, and every person that I walk up to there is like, you start talking to them and they're like, oh, Luke, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? That's just naturally like who we are as a society. Like when you're building a relationship with somebody, that's one of the first questions that you ask. And so when everybody's like, oh, like what's the point of doing a podcast with them if I don't even get to tell them what I do? It's like, what?
So not in Idaho, sorry.
True.
That's true.
But it's naturally who we are as a society for the most part. It's like we're curious what everybody does. And so if you're in a podcast with somebody and you're building a relationship with them, they're going to ask you what you do. Like, I promise you, they're going to ask you what you do if you're building a relationship with them and having a conversation. And so how that conversation can really naturally flow is they ask you what you do, you tell them what you do. And then, if there's some sort of like interest there, then you have your free entry point offer or whatnot. It's like, oh, if there is actually interest there, like we have this completely free offer. Like, I've really enjoyed this podcast. Like, I'd love to do this for you completely for free. Like we'll provide a lot of value to it, no strings attached, nothing like that. And genuinely mean it. Like genuinely mean it's free, no strings attached. There's no sales interest. Because if you do that and you don't mean it, people can sniff out that intent like that. And so it's just a natural conversation up to that point. Like,
I just had this conversation with Tom, who's using our method. He's actually works within our space, right? And he's like, hey, I started a podcast. It's great. He's like, how do I, transition people in his sales process? He's like, well, don't look at it as transition. Look at some way that you can give additional value, right? So you've already brought them onto a podcast. You're giving them a recording of that. That's great. Like, do you uncover needs? If there's a need and you can help them and you can do it in a way that's like, hey, by the way, I have this, I suggest to them like a, kind of like a growth marketing plan, or, that you can do completely free for them, do a separate call and like, here's what's worked for other clients and kind of give it to them. Right. Like that's a value. Right. And so having that goes back to your point, Ollie, which is like having some like entry level offer, whether it's an unpaid or paid or whatever. But the point being is it's funny because as you guys were talking about it, I was sitting there putting myself in the shoes of like someone in a consulting firm and being like, yeah, no duh. Like that's how it works. Like you build the relationship and it's not a sales process, but it's like at some point the person's like, hey, what is it you do? And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, could you help us with this? Right. Like maybe, I don't know. Right. Or like, hey, I do, these, AI audits where I can kind of come in and do it. I can probably do that for you guys for, whatever, X amount or whatever, but having some sort of other offer again, that you can provide an exceptional amount of value up front to build that relationship.
And it all comes down to just this. You're trying to build up goodwill. Like that's really what any relationship is, isn't it? Like when you're first meeting, like when you're first dating somebody, you're trying to build up as much goodwill. Like let's say you like this, like let's say you're first starting dating a girl and you like her, like you're trying to build up goodwill. You're taking out to dinner, you're picking up the check, like you're doing all this stuff, like you're building up goodwill anytime you build a relationship. And so it's the same exact thing. What are you guys laughing at? I'm like, I can't even think about what I'm talking about because I'm like, did I say something wrong?
No.
Terrence, dude. Why are you laughing, dude?
It's Friday. I don't know. I think I was going loopy. It's Friday. I've been like in back-to-back meetings at 7. Sorry, I did start to like smile big and then Ollie started laughing.
Well, I saw you guys both start laughing. I'm like, what did I say? Did I say something?
No, you're saying
it all comes down to goodwill. Like, how can you build up as much goodwill with every relationship as you possibly can? Because there's just naturally the law of reciprocity in human relationships. Like, if you build up a lot of goodwill with every single, like, think about it. If you could create 30 relationships this year with the decision maker at your ICP and 10 relationships this year with your ideal referral partners, and you view it as how can I build up as much goodwill with them as possible, like make it a game for yourself. How can I literally be that guy that is just providing so much value and building up so much goodwill? There's no way you fail. Like, there's absolutely no way you fail. The law of reciprocity makes it physically impossible for you to fail if you do that.
Yeah, and I think it always goes back to what we say over here. The businesses who provide the most value typically win, right? And so it's all about being able to provide value to the marketplace, doing so without also expecting anything in return, right? And being able to build those genuine relationships. Because I think the biggest thing about what we're preaching over here as well is that even if a client doesn't close right away, even if a prospect doesn't close, even if a relationship doesn't close, they're always going to think about you. Maybe if you build a good relationship with them and they don't ever close, they could refer you to somebody else still. So it's all about building those relationships, providing that goodwill, knowing that, if you provide enough goodwill, there's always going to be things that reciprocate as a result of it. And so, just that would be our advice over here is provide as much value to the marketplace that you can.
You want to build relationships to the point where even if they don't close, like if I were to pick up the phone and call somebody that I did a podcast with 6 months ago, they would see that call coming and be like, oh, Luke, like I want to talk to him. Like I want to talk to him. Like that is really the goal. Like it's not quick sales. It's nothing like that. The goal is to build those relationships.
That's probably one of the most underrated part of our process that clients tell us is like shout out to Chris at Ryan, right? He's like, and he's been with us for about a year, I think almost a year, if not right after. And he's like, Terrence, you've heard him say, Luke, Terrence, I have 20 CIOs that I've met and developed relationships using this process that I could pick up and call them right now or text them right now and they respond. 20 CIOs, right? That he now has that relationship. He's like, that is unbelievably powerful, right? Like he's like, it took me 5 years to build a relationship with 20 CIOs, right? And so, and again, I don't want to make a shortcut analogy here, but like the power in terms of using this to exponentially leverage what you've already done to make your firm successful, which is building a network, building relationships, and being able to leverage that for business. and being able to use this process to leverage to scale your firm even further.
And I think that, like, I know we're hitting about an hour here. I think
Yeah.
that, like, if we were to give one piece of, like, if I were to give one piece of advice, it would be, you know, if you disregard everything that we talked about today, the one thing that you should take away from this is, how can I, well, actually 2 parts. 1, who is my ideal client profile? And 2, how can I get into conversations with them? And once I'm in the conversation with them, how can I make it a game to provide as much value and build up as much goodwill with them as possible before I even ever think about what's in it for me? Like, if you do those 2 things, if you figure out who your ideal client profile is, you have a way to get into conversations with them, and you just provide so much value that they're to the point like, oh my God, like Terrence, like I can't keep taking all this value from you. There's no way you'll fail. Like there's absolutely no way you don't succeed with that.
Agree. All right. We're an hour in. We're gonna wrap up. I know, Ali, you should have some sales calls that you should be going to. I know I've got to jump to a client meeting. So, all right. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch you next Friday.